Hey, it's Tyler. Thanks for joining. So, if you're watching this, that means you're ready to get started. All of the supplies you're going to need are listed in the supply section on the resource page. And all the slides I'm going to be going through are in the exact same place. So let's get started. So today, we're going to make the first part of our dough creature. So I'm going to follow along on the slides here, and you can do the same at home, or you can just watch me here. So let me ask you, who was Frankenstein? What do you know about Frankenstein and his creature? You see, Victor Frankenstein and his monster were created 200 years ago by Mary Shelley in her novel Frankenstein. Since then, these characters have appeared in plays, movies, TV shows, comic books, and many other places. You may recognize Frankenstein's creature as a Halloween costume, a classic Hollywood monster, or a complex character in Shelley's story. Well, in Mary Shelley's original story, Victor Frankenstein was a science student with a secret project. He built a person out of dead body parts and brought it to life. You see, Victor used the biggest body parts that he could find because they're easier to work with. And he used electricity to jolt the creature back to life. Do you think that could possibly work? Or is this just science fiction? Well, what we're going to do today is play with some of these ideas and concepts. What happens when we pass electricity through different types of bodies? So, let's get started by learning the basics. So step one, learn the difference between conductive and insulating materials. So in our example, we're going to be using some dough that is going to be colored, and that is going to be conductive. Now, what does that mean? If something is conductive, that means electricity can flow through it. We're also going to be using some white modeling clay that is an insulator or insulating. And so that means the opposite. Electricity can't pass through this nearly as well as it can a conductor. So we're going to start by making a very simple circuit. So take 2 balls of colored dough and put a wire from the battery pack into each dough ball. So I'm going to be using just this 9-volt battery here. I'm going to take the red wire and plug it into one dough ball, and take the black wire and plug it into the other dough ball like so. Good. Now set the dough balls near each other, but don't let them touch just yet. Next, make a simple circuit, find an LED. So you may have heard of LEDs before. I have some jumbo LEDs here. Separate the metal legs or terminals, which I have already done. Now it says put the longer leg into the dough with the red wire or the positive wire. So there's a few things we need to understand here. First off, let's talk about the legs of the LED. So as you can see, one leg is slightly longer than the other. That slightly longer leg is going to be the positive terminal for our LED. So when we talk about our battery pack and we have a red wire and a black wire, the red wire is going to be our positive terminal. So our instructions say put the longer leg into the dough with the positive terminal. So I'm going to split this leg out a little bit longer, and I like to put a little bend in it because then it's easier for me to keep track of which one is my positive side. So with my positive LED leg in the red side of the dough, whoop, I'm set. And now it says take the shorter legs, the one we're not using, and put that into the dough with the black wire. So voila, and you see we have a little light, a little illumination. Now you'll notice the light changes its intensity depending on how far in I have the LED. More on that later. And it turns out you could even use multiple LEDs. As long as you know which is the long side of the LED, the positive side, it can join in and light up as well. You see the blue LED got dimmer because it has to share the electricity with the other LED. You can see it gets brighter when we take it out. Now, if you're using a battery pack with a switch, make sure it's turned on. Also, for safety's sake, we don't ever want the red side and the black side of our battery pack to touch. That's called a short circuit. So to prevent short circuits, we're going to put the 2 balls close to each other here. Let's give them their juice back. There we go. Now it says push the 2 balls of conductive colored dough together and notice the LED dims and goes out. So let's try that really quickly. We push them together, it dims and goes out. Dims and goes out. Now why is that? Well, the electricity wants to go the easiest path from the positive to the negative terminal. And if it can skip the LED, it will do so. But that's called a short circuit. when electricity flows nonstop back to its source, and we don't want that. So we're going to take a insulator, or for us, our clay, and we're going to put that in between the two conductive sides. So we're going to have three zones: a positive side, get back in there, a negative side, and an insulator in between the two. So now we can squeeze these all together to make one little brick, and we can retest our circuit. So the positive side goes into the red side. Oh, and I put the negative side into the insulator. Well, look at that. It stops the flow of electricity, just like what we wanted to happen. So now, if we pull them apart, split those legs even further so they can do the splits over top, aha! Electricity is now jumping around the insulator by going through the LED. Perfect! Now, what if we decided that we wanted to make a creature like Mary Shelley's Dr. Frankenstein? So in the beginning, she made the monster off of what she thought was interesting at the time. So if you could design your own monster, what would it be like? What sort of story would you tell if you were Mary Shelley and you were making it up as you went? Well, that's what we're going to do next. So now, also in the resources section, look for the monster manual, and I'll meet you there on page 1. All right, so page 1 of your monster manual should look like this. You have a story starter. This is where we talk about what characters, what setting, and what the initial start of our story is. So I've already filled mine out just to give you an example, but you can do whatever you want. So the first part, who's creating this monster? Who's your Dr. Frankenstein? For me, it's Ranch, the angry plumber. Then, where was it created? What's the setting for our story? I chose the sewers of San Diego. Never been there, don't know what it's like. So for me, it's all fiction. All right, why did they create the monster? Well, for me, I thought Ranch, maybe he wanted a helper who could get into small, dark, and smelly places that he didn't want to go to. Well, what exactly makes it a monster in this story? Well, Ranch put this together with 1/3 lizard, 1/3 turtle, and 1/3 stray dog to make his own Frankenstein-style monster. Now, what happens when you apply electricity to it? Now remember, we're working with our LED setup. So what part of your monster would you like to light up? Once you play around with these ideas, fill out your monster manual, and then you can move on to page 2. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now you're ready to sketch out your monster. So use this area to draw a blueprint of your monster. Use the 2 different patterns to show the difference between conductive and non-conductive areas. So I have drawn out my monster. I could have decided on a name if I wanted it to be Burplum or Bellrump or Merblep. Maybe you have a preference. But anyways, here's my monster. And I've drawn out the back of it, the turtle part of it. That's the part that I want to light up. So I've labeled it. There's conductive areas, which I show in white, and there are non-conductive parts, which I show with the black stripes. And then I labeled them by putting a positive sign and a negative sign over which side I knew the LED would need to connect to. So in this example, the positive side of the LED goes in green, and then it comes out the other side in pink. But maybe you saw in our first example, you can use lots of different colors, and you can connect it any way you want to. All right, so now it's your turn to turn our little experiment into an actual part of your monster story. So, to build a creature that conducts electricity, use your colored dough to make a creature. Use the white clay to prevent short circuits. The colored dough will be both positive and negative zones, and the white clay will be the insulator. Make sure you include those ideas from page 1 and 2 of your monster manual. Super important! Make sure that your conductive and non-conductive parts stay separate. You don't want them touching, otherwise that's a short circuit, and then our monster won't come to life. Go ahead and get crafting, and then once you're all set, we'll meet you back here. Cool! All set? Made your monster? So you should now have a part of your monster that has conductive dough and non-conductive insulating clay. Now we can use the concepts we covered earlier to apply it to our monster to start bringing it to life. So, back in our instructions, make sure you've decided where your insulating area is and which side you want to be the positive and which side you want to be the negative. I'll do positive on my left, negative on my right like this. Now, Yeah, I have a little hint here that says you can bend the legs to get it to stay if you're having a little bit of trouble. Depends on what kind of dough you're using and how sticky it is. There you go. A little bend helps them stay in place a little bit better. All right, cool. Positive on the left, negative on the right for me. Now, connect a power source to your creation that matches the positive and negative side. Now I have a little diagram here to remind you of how electricity should flow. So it's going to start in our red positive wire, go into the conductive clay. It is now charging through the positive side of the LED. It wants to go through the LED, but it can't because it doesn't have an escape route. So this is where we plug in our negative side. Ta-da-da! Completing the circuit. So we have a full circuit here with our LED turning it on inside of our monster part. Now, that's pretty cool just to start with, but we want to keep going with this. So on page 3 in your monster manual, you're going to start storyboarding out the rest of your story. So what I have here is 4 different beats or 4 different moments for you to fill in. You can do that by drawing pictures, you can do that by writing in words, but the idea here is that when you come up with a story, it's good to know the most important parts. Film directors do this all the time. So what you want to do is fill out those first 4 moments of your story, introducing your characters, introducing the setting, and what's going to happen in the very beginning. Here, let me show you my little example. So, in my first moment, we meet Ranch, and he's saying, "I wish I had a helper." By the second moment, he sees the other animal friends down in the sewers that maybe could help him out. In the third moment, he Frankensteins them all together and has a new creation, but it's not alive yet. So in the fourth moment, he sees a Tesla coil and decides, maybe this could help bring my monster to life. There we go. We have our first scene of our story. But now we need to put it into our coding environment so we can actually see this thing really come to life. So in the next video, I'll introduce you to Snap and how we can control this so it doesn't just light up or turn off when we pull our power out. I'll see you there.